Ladies and gentlemen, let me interrupt the end of our meal to welcome you all to our meeting concerning the DeSoto and Army ammunition plant and what's to be done with the land out there. And I welcome you all. I especially want to welcome our volunteers who have come here either by taking off from work or taking off from their golf game. Well, given this weather, I suspect it was something else that you had in mind besides golf, but welcome. And we appreciate you coming. My name is Chris Iliff. I am the chairman of the Johnson County Planning Commission. And I think this will be an interesting and informative meeting today. I'm glad to see that wastewater staff is here. You can't really have a development without having some plan for what you're going to do with the wastewater. And I think that's critical. We've got Johnson County Department of Health and Environment staff, also critical for anything as intensely to be developed as is what's going on out in DeSoto. And then our Parks and Recreation staff. And Bill, thank you for coming and also for being our driver when we took a tour of the area. You certainly knew your way around much better than any of us, and we're thankful to you for that. And then we'll go into a discussion. So let's do this before we get started. We'll start down here with Diane and have everybody just introduce yourself.
So I'm Diane Woodland, Johnson County Planning. I'm Zoe Brown, planning intern.
Chris Iliff.
Susan Meyer, County Manager's Office.
Chair Melcher, City of DeSoto.
Karen Miller, planning department.
Brian Hughes. So
Very diverse health environment.
Michelle Briggs, Johnson County Planning. Where does that for Park and Rec?
Jim Reeves, planning and so forth.
Roger Mason, Planning Commission.
Bill Mawson, Park and Rec.
Aaron Witt, Johnson County Wastewater. Sean Pendley, County Planning. Michael Evan, Planning Commission.
Got a lot of your planning stuff. I'm here to remind you to use the microphone, please.
And we have these table mics. They are pretty receptive. So if you just have it on your general area, it should work like this. So thank you.
All right, well, that's great. Thanks very much. And we will, I'm going to turn it over to Diane for a few words.
Yeah, you can just do a quick intro reminder and then I'll start it off with the intro.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, thanks everybody for coming. And so everybody should have, let's do a little housekeeping. I think everybody knows where the restrooms are. Just turn right down the hall. And you've got some handouts, PowerPoints in the agenda that are at your desk, and some additional maps that might be helpful to have for our discussion. And so we'll just kind of start out with our presentations. I think Sean wanted to mention something and then we'll get going on wastewater.
Yeah. Thanks, Diane. As Diane mentioned, we've got all the materials available. And of course, we again, thank you for all the other departments who are here for presentations. So we just wanted to send a reminder about, let everyone know about the format. So today's meeting, the first half essentially be presentations with the different county departments. Then the second half will be discussion with the subcommittee. So at that point, the other staff members are free to go after about 1 or 1:15, whenever we're done. But we'll ask if there are any questions following those presentations, and then the staff is able to go. Probably would like to have the second half of the meeting for discussion on, we're going to begin that discussion for any recommendations or consideration of recommendations for this committee going forward. And so just reminders again to use your table mics whenever you do want to speak. We've got questions as we go. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. So thank you to Susan Pekarik, Aaron Witt, and Stuart Lord from Johnson County Wastewater. They'll start with the presentation. I think Stuart's got the floor here for his presentation to start. Thanks.
Okay. Now,
And I think this.
Slide dealing. All right. Okay, again, my name's Stuart Lord with Johnson County Wastewater. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the process when it comes to system expansion, bringing sewers into a new area. And then we'll talk a little bit about the challenges involved with sunflower. But I'd like to keep it, even though we're going to have discussions at the end, I'd like to keep this pretty open to where if you got questions or comments as we go, please shout them out. So with that, we'll hit one of these buttons. There we go. The enlargement process for JCW is petition driven. So, and by that, I mean that we don't do a master plan to decide where we're going to bring sewers into an area. It's really more based on what the property owners in the area would like, right? So what we'll do is if we have developers or property owners that are interested in getting sewers, we'll look at the entire watershed and then kind of narrow it down into sub-basins. And once we get a significant number of folks in a certain sub-basin, we'll bring them all in and talk to them about what it takes to get sewers. And from that point, if there's enough of those folks that are interested in enlarging the consolidated main sewer district, interested in getting sewers, then they'll have to sign a petition requesting that. And by signing that petition, they're agreeing to pay $380 per acre per year. So that there's really an incentive to not go forward with these enlargements unless they have a plan, right? And unless you got a plan you're ready to develop, then okay, now I'm willing to sign this petition to make this happen. So at that point, we would take the petition to the Board of County Commissioners to consider. Again, one thing to keep in mind here is that it's watershed focused. When we do the design, when we're looking at those sub basins, it's keeping in mind everything that's tributary. So we'll design for any other sewers that would be upstream. Now, the consolidated main sewer districts, those are the primary trunk lines. So those are going to go along the creeks. We take those up to a quarter mile from the top of watershed. Those are publicly financed. So those come out of the consolidated sewer fund. Any branches off of that, those would be lateral sewer districts. And those are bringing the sewers up to the homes themselves. Those are privately financed. So those will be financed by the developers or the property owners. All right. You're over there?
I'm over here.
Interesting.
Oh. Because I was-
Okay. What did you? Oh, okay. Okay. There we go. All right. So this is just representing what we just talked about. So the black line would be the border of the sub basin that we'd be considering. The green lines would be a consolidated main sewer district lines. Again, those are following the creeks. Once you get up to the edge, once you get up to the top of the hill, once we get a quarter mile from there, then it's going to be responsibility of the property owners and developers to put in those blue lines, which is the LSD lines. Okay. Here's it's showing that again in more of a large water scale or watershed representation here. So again, you can see the green lines going up the creeks. And one thing to point out here is like in the Blue River watershed. So this is zoomed into our, the southeast corner of the county. In the Blue River watershed, there's several cities involved. So we're serving areas in Leawood and in Overland Park and in Olathe and eventually possibly Spring Hill. You never know. So we're not looking at the city limit boundaries. We're looking at the watershed in total when we do our design for the downstream sewers. And that's something that's different than most of the cities that provide sewers. They're looking at their city limit boundary and looking at maybe where they're going to potentially annex in the future, that type of thing, when they're designing their sewers. This shows where the treatment plants are in the county. You can see there's 6 different purple triangles. That's JCW's treatment plants. And then, yeah, so up here is DeSoto's plant. Olathe has a couple in here. Here's Gardner's, Edgerton's, then Spring Hills is down here somewhere in Miami County. So the thing to point out on this slide is there's a lot of white space, right? There's a lot of area here that isn't in a city. And when you look at what's downstream of these areas, it's basically you, Chad, right? DeSoto's downstream. Some of this area would be, upstream of Olathe possibly, but all this Kill Creek it's headed towards the river. This is just a closer representation of that. And this is what DeSoto shared with us last time, showing where the new pump stations are going to be, one to serve this Flint development area, and then the Sunflower one to serve this Astra development. The red hatching here, that's the Sunflower development. And obviously the orange boundary here is DeSoto's city limit. So you can see that it takes up quite a bit of it. Now, we looked back in 1999, we did have a study done to take a look at what it would take to serve those these 2 large watersheds, Captain Creek and Kill Creek. And it looks something like this. So really what the things to get out of it, there's 6 or 7 different alternatives in that study. So nothing was too defined, but they all had a couple things in common. And one of that being, you'd probably be looking at a regional type of pump station. In this case, it would be something downstream at the end of Captain Creek to then pump over to a treatment plant that would be more of a regional treatment plant for Kill Creek. I think this is roughly where DeSoto's old plant was, maybe, and then now it's more here in the middle.
Stuart, I'd add that's north is to the right on this particular.
Yes, thank you.
Um,
Yeah, we're now flowing to the right.
Stuart, this is Sean. I just had a question too in this. So this plan here was a conceptual plan for how it could be served. None of this has actually been provided or installed.
Correct. Yeah, because this was back in '99. So it was just a study to see what it would take. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see in your handouts or not, but it gets down to 114-inch diameter pipe. That's huge. So so whether it would really work like this is hard to say, but that's the conceptual idea they had back then.
Yeah, Stuart, I'll just jump in and add that I think the key, because there were a lot of different alternatives and maybe siting, but the key from this was being able to serve by gravity, which is the most sustainable and efficient way to serve wastewater, served by gravity for those 2 major watersheds up to some type of regional facility. And there would need to be a pump station located somewhere at the top of one of those watersheds to transfer over to wherever that may be. But that was the key concept here on that study, was a regional facility to serve this area.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I don't have a solution slide or anything like that. It's hard to say exactly what to do, but we did just kind of want to point out the challenges that are in play here. So the DeSoto's plan now is to serve the city boundary that you have, right? And so what gets done in the wide areas is still open.
Stuart, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Let's say that there's 10 landowners in a particular area that's considering petitioning for sewers. And 9 of them signed the petition, the 10th one doesn't. Is there any rule with regard to the rights or lack of for the minority who
Yeah.
don't want to be involved?
Yeah. I didn't get into the details of our process, but
And I don't want you to get into the
but I'll just go a
nitty-gritty.
little deeper. Yeah.
Okay.
So, so when I said we need 51% of the land area to sign the petition, then the other 49%, depending on the type of property that it is, it may qualify for a deferment. And so they wouldn't have that $380 per acre per year charge like the
Yeah.
ones that sign the petition.
Okay,
Stuart, is that forever or when's the 380?
Until they connect.
Okay.
Yep. Does anyone have a solution here?
Stuart, one thing I'm wanting to add here is there's the technical piece about how to serve that and maybe where that regional facility is located or how the treatment facilities are located. But it's also from the regulatory standpoint, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and their permitting process and protecting water quality and those types of things that there used to be a lot of treatment facilities within the Johnson County area, and the state did a concerted effort to really consolidate a lot of those plants into what Johnson County wastewater has today. So there's been a concerted effort not to have smaller plants. Or so, that's one thing we want to think through is also the rate from the regulatory standpoint. What's the easiest way to make sure we're protecting water quality and being able to meet those permits and even get a permit to be able to treat and release those flows. Because right now in those areas, we've got, like Stuart pointed out, Gardner has one on Kill Creek, Olathe is in Cedar Creek. We'll have DeSoto's facility. So those are three facilities that are actually flowing down and going into the Kansas River. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to point out there's a technical piece and there's also the regulatory piece.
And I just want to say something about wastewater planning ahead in 1999. Please remember that ammunition plant was active in manufacturing until about 2002, 2000, that time frame. So they were really thinking way ahead. That's 24 years ago. Nobody thought that DeSoto wanted to become the second largest city in the metropolitan area when they decided to annex.
okay.
So I'm kind of trying to think about what all this means in terms of planning. And it seems like there's two areas about the area to the west of the Army ammunition plant.
Hey, Karen, is your mic on down?
Thank you. We have the area to the west, which is in Captain Creek. And then we have the area to the east of the ammo plant, which is kind of in two different sub-basins of Kill Creek. And so
It's kind of looking, you've got this map, the small one. That's what Karen was talking here. It was that-
Yeah.
So the assumption I was just kind of was making was that if higher density development, residential development or commercial development was to come in at something less than 2 acres, which is you can do septics at 2 acres, and if you go less, you need sewers, that it would just automatically be required to be annexed into DeSoto. Is that really a policy question about kind of how that will unfold?
Yeah, to be completely honest, if we get calls from folks around in here saying that they want sewer service, we tell them to call DeSoto because that's who's downstream.
And DeSoto wouldn't serve sewer to anyone that didn't annex.
Annex.
Yeah.
So that's the assumption I was
Yeah.
making. So it's kind of best just to ask and get that put forward. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I would say to that question, if you look in the southern part of the Kill Creek watershed where Gardner could expand north and those flows still go to the north, Olathe, I don't know if they'd ever, but they went west. You could have other cities besides Gardner in that watershed. If they developed at a higher density that would need service,
Mhm.
probably going to the north. Or like we were talking about efficiency with how you serve that, possibly serve to the north as far as they go, and then have to pump back to a facility, so you'd be using more energy. So
Might clarify that a little bit. If there was service available from Johnson County wastewater, I mean, we wouldn't require them to pump or, work around Johnson County wastewater system. Let's say, for instance, there was one in Cedar Creek, because they annexed into DeSoto. I mean, that makes no sense. We're just, if we provided infrastructure size and planning for an area, it really wouldn't make sense to 6,000 folks living in DeSoto to let them consume our resources and not getting other tax revenue out of it.
This is Sean. And so I guess just in general, as far as coordination, so if there was a development proposal, as to Karen's point, if we're looking at it from a land use standpoint, so part of this is we'll look at any potential land use changes outside of the area that's since been annexed by DeSoto. If there are any development proposals, chances are, if it's any density, it would probably go into the city if that's within the growth area of the city. So I assume there's got to be that coordination between the city and Johnson County wastewater. It just depends on where the development is and what density, and that's that coordination that would have to happen.
Right.
We may not have all that identified at this time, but it does make sense for us to be coordinating with the city on their future land use plans. And I think, Chet, you may not know, maybe Mike or Brad can speak to this more from the planning side of the city, but there is a plan for future land use plan. And the city is getting ready to go through an update to their future land use plan too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Well,
something that we'll
We
continue.
did, but all we did was change some of the land use around Lexington to
Okay.
multi.
Not much changed in this area to the east of the Sunflower property.
No, it's all already existing large lot, single family, so.
Any further questions for Stuart? If not, we'll move on to our presentation from the Health and Environment staff.
All right, so I'm Zach Milburn with the Health and Environment.
It is.
So what I did today was just basically give a high level of what our division does with the health and environment. So mainly it's on site. We have roughly 10,000 plus on-site septic systems in Johnson County. 9,800 of them is under Johnson County Health and Environment's jurisdiction. The other 1,800 would be under city jurisdictions. Example, City of DeSoto, they have their own sanitary code, and City of Overland Park are two of the major ones that have their own sanitary codes. The other ones would be like City of Gardner and City of Edgerton. We don't do on-site septic systems for those cities. 300 of those systems are on a commercial septic, which would be like what we call a CIOP, a commercial industrial operating permit that we inspect yearly. So that would be all of that region. I apologize, I didn't put a map in the presentation, but that would be the entire region around Sunflower is all on septic at this point. It's something that we are also changing in our code this coming year would be that if the property is 15 acres or more, they would be allowed to have a lagoon that hasn't been available in the past. So that's something else to keep in mind with the rural density is that with this 15 acres or more, you'd have the potential of properties with lagoons on them that we didn't have before. And so it would be anything 2 acres or larger would be required to have a septic system. On-site septic systems are, if a property is within 200 feet of a sewer's, on-site septic is those properties would be required to connect those wastewater lines. As of right now, as Stuart's slides show, that is all white in those areas, so there's no sewer districts in those areas. So septic is also septic is the viable option for those areas. And I know septic in the past has probably have kind of a negative connotation about people not wanting to have them. Septic has come a long ways than what they were in the 80s and 70s with just a pipe, a septic tank and a pipe that we kind of joke just went out into a ditch. Nowadays, we size and design septic systems for the life expectancy of that property. So when that home is built, they're sized to last 30 plus years is how we size them now. Some of the other things that our division does is swimming pool inspections, aquatics. We have 380 sites that equals 615 bodies of water. So if the property has multiple pools, a spa, and even like some of the swim beaches, we do the inspections out there as well. Some of the things that we look at with the solid waste is we do the deaf and ball inspection for the landfill out there. There's 3 construction and demolition landfill sites in Johnson County that we inspect. And then there's 2 waste transfer stations within Johnson County that we also inspect. Right now, there are 10 waste hauler companies that take trash to either one of the transfer stations or to the deaf and ball landfill site or the construction demolition landfill site. And then we also have our household hazardous waste facility. That's at the Nelson Complex in northern Johnson County. This summer, it will be actually by another wastewater treatment facility, but it would be off of 69 Highway and College. We are contracted through KDHE for the air quality program for the facilities that meet the emissions requirements to have a permit. There's 207 permitted sites in Johnson County, and 40 of them we inspect annually. I think we may be doing the Panasonic as well, but I'm not 100% certain until about that one. I think it'll be closer when it's in operations when we find out from KDHE if that would be meeting the emissions threshold. And then we also have a green business program that work with businesses to become more sustainable, whether it's just recycling or we work with a lot of the school districts for the food waste reduction programs with them. And that's all I have for environmental.
Any questions? You were very efficient.
I was told to make it quick.
All right. All right. Parks and Recreation, Bill.
So I won't be that efficient. Sorry, Chris. It's a dangerous thing. You guys gave me a microphone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, you'll see some of the things we're going to talk about. I'm going to have 3 hands here, but so this is when we were created. So way back when Johnson County was a wilderness, right? Covered wagons had just left. We became a park district. Logo, we went countywide in '69, became Johnson County Park and Recreation District. It doesn't seem to point at you. Does that help?
I was messing with it.
Not working. Part of the test, isn't it? There we go. That's me. 36 years with JCPRD. Some of you young bucks don't even know what 36 years ago was. I was hired as a land acquisition person in 1986. And I've been doing that for this agency since then. And even though my role has changed overall, it's one of the principal things I do for the agency long term. We have 10,800 acres, and I'll talk about some of the future stuff as we go through this presentation in your packet. But so here's what I'm hoping to just talk about today. We did try to plan ahead as much as possible when we were trying to acquire Sunflower. We'll get into it. All right, so in 2005, JCPRD negotiated with the Sunflower Redevelopment Authority or Limited Liability Corporation. Let me go back a little farther. In 2002, approximately 2001, when the Army decided to access the ammunition plant, there's a program called the Federal Lands to Parks Program. And any unit of government can apply for a no-cost transfer through the respected federal agency that you're involved with. So if we were a school district, we could have gone through the Department of Education. We aren't. We went through the National Park Service and applied for up to, and were granted authority to get up to 3,000 acres of the ammunition plant for a no-cost transfer. We negotiated that down to 2,000 acres to help Sunflower Redevelopment give it some legs, if that makes any sense. We didn't want to take everything out from under them, and we felt it was a reasonable amount of acres for us to handle in the future. And of course, the National Park Service had to assume and had to study to make sure we were capable of handling that much acreage. And so Chad, don't be offended by this, but City of DeSoto applied for, I think, 80 acres of it for a no-cost transfer, and the National Park Service said no, because they didn't think they could handle it. Just one of those things. So in our agreement with Sunflower Redevelopment, we did require an early transfer of 130 acres. I'll show you all that in the graphic in a second. And then we also, in the agreement, preserved roadway and utility corridors. So we didn't want to be restrictive to future growth. We wanted to be a community partner. So we assumed 107th, College Boulevard, 111th Street, 127th and 135th Street, as well as Edgerton Road right down the middle. And I'll show you those in a graphic. We also just redid our agreement with Sunflower, did an amendment to it. And that was because of the Panasonic facility. So, all right, so this is in your packet. Now this yellow J, everything in green, JCPRD currently owns. So this is the early transfer right here. This is 130 acres that came to us in 2005. We own Hill Creek Park. We have built trails in red. Sunflower Park up here on the north end used to be part of the ammunition plant. It came to us in 1972 as part of the Federal Lands to Park program. So that's not a new program. It's been going on for a long time. We actually have a deed signed by James Watt. Anybody remember James Watt? No, anyway. So that's why you see blue and why you see purple, because both of those institutions, KU and K-State, both applied for federal lands program to get former federal property transferred to them. Questions about the graphic? In essence, basically everything in yellow had been what the Army used to call buffer between explosive materials and neighbors. Way back when there was a colonel on site in the 1980s, Gary Haller, some of you might remember Gary, went over and talked to the colonel, and he had this map on his office wall and had these big circles on it. And the circle here went way out here. It's like the explosive arc if something catastrophically went wrong. A lot of things planning didn't know about in those days, I expect.
Bill, this is Sean, one question on the transfer land in yellow. When maybe you're going to cover this, when is that expected to be transferred to JCPRD?
So the agreement says it cannot be transferred until the entire plant is 100% clean to residential standard. Now, the early transfer happened. We aren't able to use it until the entire plant is clean. Now, the amendment we just completed in September, and I'll show you a graphic on that.
And I assume that could be phased.
It can be fixed as long as Sunflower Redevelopment is willing to do that. So this is the second transfer that will happen this July, hopefully, maybe June. This is where the Panasonic plant is going to be. So this is the early transfer piece right here. And this will be the 265 acres that we will get that is on that northeast corner. So here's the quarry, if that helps you. The quarry road is right there. And then goes into the quarry at that point. The quarry road exists by agreement between Sunflower Redevelopment, JCPRD, and Martin Marietta. And I think Johnson County Planning has some regulatory authority over them too, correct? There is an agreement. Yeah.
So what you're saying is the part of the west side, south, has not been transferred.
Everything in yellow has not been transferred.
So,
Only thing that's been transferred is that one little piece right there.
and so if the rule stands that other than what you just maybe get it in June, that it can't be transferred till the project is clean. My question is this, if they put a 3,000 acre solar energy farm in the south,
Mhm.
if they do that, you may not know this, but that have to be clean ground before they do that because it's not inhabited.
That's probably a question way above my pay grade. I'm gonna guess Chet will deal with that as they go through that planning process, but the EPA still has some oversight on this facility because if all of the military cleanup has to be completed before the solar panels can go in.
That was my question.
That's the big thing. So if there's any military related waste, that has to be taken care of before they can build on it. So they've been removing sewer pipes and buildings and for, since 2005. And of course, all of the cost associated with cleanup to date has been borne by the Army. Army created it, Army's cleaning it up.
The presentation you got on wrong was they said that 10% of the project has been clean. Did I hear that?
I think that sounds low.
Yeah, probably.
10% of the 9,000 acres.
I think it sounds low, and there's a graphic, there's a map available that I could show you if I could get to my computer, but it shows the areas where the EPA has released their oversight.
I think that, because I went back and checked my notes and I thought that was a small amount.
That sounds very small to me. That would only be 900 acres.
That was told in the presentation.
That sounds really low to me.
Did the roadway corridors that you reserved, do those also extend to Kill Creek or K-State?
They in theory, only part that we could control is what we own. So we can't say anything about what K-State's going to do. But 127th Street is on the very north edge of K-State, on the south edge of Kill Creek Park, right through there. College at the time was on the very north edge of Kill Creek Park. Edgerton Road is right down the middle. Basically, I think DeSoto has a future. I think Mike talked about it last time, where they have a plan for a major road through the middle that would cross this piece that JCPRD would own someday. But I do think, Jim, by agreement, Sunflower can release real estate to us at any time when we're ready for it, even if some land on the plant is not clean.
Really?
Yeah, I think they have the authority to do that. As long as it's not military pollution. If it's what they would call residential pollution, like asbestos.
Well, how much the place was, how much of it was considered military pollution? Do you have an idea?
I don't know that answer.
I've been there 10 weeks, so I don't.
You need to be staying
Well,
up
I'll
later.
tell you what, I will send Diana and Karen some graphics that shows the EPA areas, and then they can send it out to the group. Then they have what they call these solid waste management units. You heard that term. I know you have, Jim, but there's solid waste management units all over this facility. And anyway, long story short, one of the last ones they just cleaned up was up here near the Quarry Road. Right in this area, right here, they had 2 drainage areas they cleaned up, and they had an old solid waste dump there, and they came in and hauled it all away. Yeah. All right. Well, let me get to my stuff. So plans for 2023 for JCPRD. We are going to initiate an overall master plan for this entire, so altogether, we will have about 3,000 acres in this neighborhood someday. And we want to look at having an overall master plan. One of the reasons we want to do that, I'm gonna go back a slide. So here, this site got trimmed significantly because of the needs of Panasonic. So by agreement, Sunflower Redevelopment can trim or adjust the boundaries of that yellow polygon. If they move a boundary, they got to replace it someplace. We would like to establish a future use that might limit their ability to move that boundary. And a master plan will help us with that. Make sense? This is the first master plan update in the Kill Creek area since the early 1990s. And then we are going to initiate the expansion of Kill Creek Streamway near the Quarry Road. I'll show a graphic for that in a second. Big issue, those last 2 bullets. We have real estate that will be impacted by the future sewers that will serve Panasonic. We've agreed to cooperate, and we even understand that part of our existing trail will close for a period of time. 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. Because they're going to have to put sewers there. It's just kind of a fact of life. It's basically a fact of life for every one of our streamway trails in the county periodically have to close because of utility construction. And sometimes it's utilities we're building, or sometimes it's utilities somebody else is building. So the public will be hurt a little bit by that, but it'll be short term. Make sense? And I think this is showing you where the trail that we're talking about, this expansion of the Kill Creek Trail. So the trail starts in the park right here, and ends up here where it currently terminates. Once again, there's the quarry. Quarry Road is right there. We're going to cross the Quarry Road at grade with an at grade crossing. With a stop sign not for trucks, but for people. It's a floodplain, so we can't really bore underneath that road because it would flood all the time. It'd be underwater all the time. So we have to cross it at grade. We have at grade crossings in other places in the county that have a lot more traffic than that road does. Roughly 300 trucks a day. We have other crossings that are much higher than that.
Are the trails gonna get to Caw eventually?
Pardon me?
You're gonna be able to get a trail down to Caw?
Yeah. This will be the piece that gets you from basically 143rd Street all the way to the Caw. Once we get this piece done on Kill Creek. There you go. Any other questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Chris, if you want, I was going to mention before we start discussion with the committee, are there any other questions for any of the staff from wastewater, environmental, or JCPRD, specifically related to the sunflower plant or anything in general? If not, those staff, you're welcome to stay if you like, or you're free to go. We appreciate you presenting. It's really been helpful, and I'll ask if there's any other questions or reference.
I did have one thing to add, Sean. We are officially changing that name. At some places it says Main Avenue, some places it's Dual Drive. That's going to become Astra Parkway. So just so anybody hears that, we've Astra Parkway.
Well, Chet, that's where currently the main entrance to the ammunition plant is by the water tower.
Correct.
That's what you're talking about. Main, used to be Main Street.
Yes.
It'll become at Astor Parkway.
Yep.
And then one question I did have too for City of DeSoto. Obviously, everything's going forward now with Panasonic development. Are there any other updates? I know, as Jim had mentioned, possibility of solar development. At this time, there's no other plans. I know a future land use may continue with the remainder of the property, but all of the remaining ground in Sunflower has been annexed as shown here on this map. Are you aware of any other plans for development on any other part of the Astra Enterprise Park?
We've not received any applications at this point.
Thanks.
So maybe we might want to ask the reverse also, if any of the departments that did presentations, if you have any questions, maybe specifically for the city of DeSoto, since they're here, or any conversations that you want to have, now's the time, everybody's in the rooms. Yeah. So, as Sean said, thank you again for presenting and coming and speaking. Feel free to stay if you want. This kind of second part is we're just gonna kind of continue that discussion of the options for our plan update. And so you're welcome to stay for that. I know everybody has busy schedules, but so thank you again for your presentations and information. So Chris, if it's okay, I think we'll go ahead and kind
Yeah.
of dive into that.
Go, yeah, please, Stan, if you would, to lead that discussion. And, we are in some ways appreciative to the city of DeSoto for lessening our load in the county by taking so much of it in annexation. And best of luck for your own development plans. And it sounds like you've got a lot of that in hand. So. All right, go ahead, Diane.
And then just also to point out that Brian Peter's here, so if you have any public works questions, feel free to ask him. Facility, two hats, whatever.
No hat.
So I think kind of our next steps, Michelle, if you want to put up our kind of slide. So we just got a few slides to kind of start this discussion with the subcommittee planning commission members about what the options are for the plan update. And if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle. So as we talked about the last couple of meetings, really there's kind of two options that we're talking about. One of which is just updating the current sunflower area plan, or dissolving that and then just kind of reverting back to the policy area map for the remainder of the area that's left out in the county. So
And all of you have a copy. All of you have a copy of the policy.
yeah, and there's a larger one up here too, but I thought it might be easier if you had a copy of that. And then also there's a copy of the this map that shows the area in gray that DeSoto has annexed. And then this periphery is really what we're talking about. This area here outside of the gray. So everything that's collared is still remains out in the county. And that's really kind of the area that we're speaking of that we need to update. So those are kind of basically the two options. But I think at this point, planning staff is recommending that we dissolve that current sunflower Army ammunition area plant that's currently in our comprehensive plan. And then have the remaining land that's out in the county absorb it into one of our policy area map, policy areas, which would be the yellow area is our rural policy area. The green is the rural traditional policy area. And then the blue areas are kind of urban fringe policy area, and that's obviously the urban fringe areas kind of are kind of more adjacent to to the city boundaries. So if we talk about just absorbing the remaining land into the policy area map, it would kind of essentially mean that this pink area obviously goes away. And then the discussion is just kind of what policy areas that we want around that periphery that's staying out. So, and some of those reasons for maybe just resolving the plan are up here, and that's just because the annexed area is over a third of the land that's in the study area. The remaining future land uses in this study area are either rural residential or low density residential. And then, like I just said earlier, to consider which policy areas that we want in that area. So do you want to?
So,
So-
Diane, this committee is a study committee. And if we come to some resolution with regard to what we want to do, such as dissolving the previous plan, and then have some ideas about what we want to do with regard to the other areas, that would have to come back before the full planning commission. And then its recommendation would then go to the Board of County Commissioners. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. And so kind of the goal of this subcommittee is, yes, to finalize some recommendations and options for the full planning commission to review. And then staff would take planning commission's recommendations. We would draft any revisions to any chapters that are relevant in the comp plan, revise the policy area map, and then, planning commission would ultimately make a recommendation, hold a public hearing on that, and then ultimately then the Board of County Commissioners, yes, would approve any of those changes. So that's kind of the process. That's the goal of kind of what we want to do, goal of this discussion. So I think at this point, we maybe just kind of wanted to hear from the planning commissioners and anybody left here in the meeting, but just kind of what your thoughts are on staff's recommendation and the options, and then whatever comments we have, Zoe's gonna write it down. So any thoughts?
I've got a question. When you look at the map, it's this map that you gave us, which is as of October 15th. So the area, make sure I understand this, the area that's in the pink area is, which is surrounds the area that we're talking about, is listed as urban fringe. Is that not right?
No, that's the pink area is the planning, that's an area plan. So the pink area is the Sunflower Army Ammunition Plant
Okay, but
area plan. The blue is the urban fringe.
beg pardon?
Blue is urban fringe and pink is an area plan.
Yeah.
But there's also recognized as urban brand.
Yeah.
So basically, Jim, if I can help maybe explain this. So that whole area, what Diane's saying is that whole pink area go away, and what we then would be looking at is that conceptual plan. We'd be reverting back to something like this, because what we're gonna then show is the DeSoto area that's been annexed would be grayed out. So then all we're talking about is what's remaining around it. And I think what this conceptual plan, it showed those other land uses that were planned, mostly just low density residential and rural, just, the rural areas. That would be remaining. Now, the discussion would be, maybe there could be some urban fringe areas up in the far north closest to DeSoto. That's what I think we're looking for, I think is, what are any other comments on that, right? Diane, the next step here.
So
Yeah, and just to kind of add, so that was kind of the purpose of having
I guess,
the
I-
different departments kind
I'm
of.
not sure I'm clear. So the map that I'm looking at here, even though it says it's recognized as urban fringe, it is currently not urban fringe.
So let me just kind of give a little summary on how those future land use policy areas work. So this is the kind of our overall policy map. And in general, the area plans, which are specific plans for a specific area, are in the pink. And we do consider them as a type of urban fringe policy area, but the blue is the true urban fringe policy area, and that allows 10 acres per home site unless you have infrastructure and unless it coordinates well with the adjacent entities' future land use plan. Like if it's abutting Olathe, we would look at their future land use plan. So in the blue areas, sometimes you can have densities up to 2 acres per lot. So, and then the yellow and the green, those are both types of rural policy area, and those only allow 10 acres per home. There's other things that go along with it, but so the idea is to remove the pink. The pink designation refers to another plan somewhere with other different future land use designations. So this pink right here is sunflower. So this tells you, go right now and look at the sunflower plan and look at their future land use map.
So Karen, I think one of the things Diane pointed out in that policy area map, there is a little caveat on that in the parentheses on the area plan. It does say also recognized as urban fringe. Is that what you're talking about, Jim? It recognizes as urban fringe.
Well, when I looked at the map, I thought that the west line there was a county line road, so I made an assumption that that pink area was something more than just a sunflower ordinance.
So the question is, should the pink area stay the pink area? This refers to another plan, or should this change to yellow, blue, or green?
Oh, I guess, okay, so my thoughts are, it sounds like to me that the wastewater situation is going to be driven by not us, but by demand, current usage, and I'm not sure I know the exact definition of urban fringe, but what's wrong with making that whole area urban fringe? Because
Why don't we step back just a step here? And I think the recommendation of the staff and given the circumstances with the changes that have occurred there in the last 6 months, I think we just ought to start by wiping out the old Sunflower Army ammunition plant area plan. So that's just done away with. And so we start with a clean slate. And with regard to, whether something is rural or urban fringe, I think is a matter of judgment that we can seek guidance from the staff on and, input from other people. But I don't know that we need to take a vote on it here or that the vote would be binding, but my sense is that we probably all are in agreement that the old plan needs to be dissolved. And that would be our first recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners.
right there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's perfect, because I think, so I think maybe some of the next steps, and we'll get to this, is that will help staff go back and we can, and maybe before the next meeting on January 27th, maybe we can go back and try to get a draft policy area map so that you all can kind of see what that's gonna look like without the pink area. And then that helps us, then we can start having that conversation on the 27th about, well, do we want the rural policy area? And or are there some areas that could be urban fringe? So,
And I think at that meeting, if staff could make it very clear what the differences are between the two different potential land uses are.
yes,
So- And then we look at this conceptual map and we say, thank you to DeSoto for making things so simple for us
mhm,
by reducing the amount of land that we need to deal with. And also Johnson County Parks and Recreation, which, you know, has a substantial amount of this land already under their control and will be developed according to their desires. But just looking at this remainder land, you know, then I think that I won't say it's gonna be simple or necessarily easy, but I would say that it's kind of a decision between two different land uses, vast majority of this land. And there may be some exceptions in there too, you know, spot zoning or something else that we don't want to run over. But that's kind of the direction that we're going on this, I think.
and it sounds like maybe we have consensus from the others on that.
I-
And
I-
that's actually part of the reason why we wanted to, why we spent these last two meetings having the other county departments come in and give presentations. So that we kind of knew what the different infrastructure was out there existing or planned for the future, kind of how the sewers are gonna work, septic systems. So that kind of gives us those facts and information to kind of help us have a better conversation about that on the 27th. So
Roger Mason's question, as we've heard through these plans, sewer drives this thing. And how we plan to do the sewer is gonna drive that thing. Is it fair to assume that DeSoto plans to provide sewer to county line west of the DeSoto ammunition plant? That kind of helps us know what goes on, because in general, you have more density closer to good roads. And there's probably gonna be a pretty good road going north and south and up at 10 highway. And it'd be easy to assume there's probably gonna be some more either dense industrial or dense housing that would be have higher sewer requirements. That would help us know, based on the sewer intentions, it would help us know what probably ought to go in our plan around here. That same thing could flow through. It also has to do with roads. And I don't know if I'll just point for you roads or not. I see a Carnap study hatched out on this one on the far west side. And there's a little gap between some type 3 roads down there. And I don't know if that's intentional to impede traffic or if we are planning to assist traffic going north and south to get north. All those have to do with how we're gonna make that, what color ink we put on a paper. So I'm having a little trouble getting to the ink color unless we know a little bit more about that background. If you're looking to us for a direct recommendation.
we'd be the same as Johnson County wastewater. The developer would extend sewers to their property when they need it. We don't just build sewers just to
Right.
build them, so it would be same thing as Johnson County wastewater. Somebody came into our city, we will serve anybody in the city, but if it's more efficient for Johnson County wastewater to build a plant and serve somebody within the city limits, but we're not gonna hold somebody up over who sewers them. We just wouldn't sewer somebody outside the city. So if somebody wanted to be in our sewer district and connect our sewers, they would need to annex.
I figured as such, and there's only a small quarter on the west side before you get to county line. And it'll have to do with watershed and et cetera, but wastewater is not in that area anyway. So that's why I jumped forward to the conclusion that you're probably going to provide sewers if it's sewerable.
If it's sewerable, yeah.
If it's not sewerable, it might have to go west to Douglas County.
Yeah, we'd have to pump it. If we wanted to get it, we'd have to pick it up at Cap and at a pretty good sized regional lift station, and get it back over to our plant.
But it's pretty safe to assume that if there's any density, since the county and their regulations don't encourage density, it's pretty safe to assume that they're gonna annex in. If that's the case, if we made all those assumptions for make this color, we might as well have a third color that said probable DeSoto annexation. Because it's probably gonna happen. I mean, if we're talking about reality.
One thing I was gonna suggest, this is Sean, was gonna say, that part of the reason why I was asking Chet about future development in the Astor Enterprise Park and really outside of that, their future land use plan, if there were changes proposed as part of that, we would want to coordinate with them. It sounds like in this specific area, just as an example to the east of the Sunflower property, the city at this time does not have any plans for change. So we would certainly not have any plans to change our land use for what we had out in this area as rural. But if there was something that we needed to coordinate with the city, we would do that. Certainly, we wouldn't anticipate that there's any plans for sewer improvements by either Johnson County wastewater or the city if there's no plan. I think it's really one of those things that just has continued coordination with the city. Now, as for urban fringe areas, maybe if there were updates by the city's future land use plan in areas a little bit further north, maybe along 95th Street or those areas, that's where it may make sense for those to be changed to urban fringe. But it's going to be probably a continued coordination and with the city. And then as we bring forward a draft policy area map, that'd be a better chance for the community to look at that and see, okay, what areas do need to change maybe. And so we might have more information for you at the next meeting.
And I suspect that in the very near future, you're probably going to be seeing from the city of DeSoto some residential developments that they are going to want to develop, and they're going to be encouraging sewers to be put out there pretty quickly. And that, I think, will, when we see what those are, that'll impact our recommendations.
And the other part I forgot to mention to follow up on Roger's comment about the future annexation area. I don't think we would want to necessarily show that on the county's policy area map. However, the city does show on their future land use, I believe, their future growth areas. So that's in the city's plan. We'd have to kind of then it's a matter of the county and the city coordinate as to how we would designate that on our policy area map. I don't think we've ever changed it to say future city area, but we would, it might be worth looking at as far as the urban fringe. Because
And a note about the urban fringe. It's important to keep in mind that if you have an urban fringe policy area, and if there is some infrastructure there, sometimes it's kind of hard to say no to like a 2-acre development. And we have to be careful with how much of that we have, because in terms of the county and taking care of roads, all of those 2-acre lot subdivisions will have local roads, and that's a lot more maintenance and expense for the counties. So you had mentioned, well, let's just make, a whole large area, the blue. Well, that could really cause some problems for the county budget and also just keep.
I guess my main concern is if we, whatever category we put it in, the west side of the area is pretty darn rural south. And I don't want to cannibalize a landowner out there in order to develop or sell his property on smaller plans and so on. So
You don't want to what?
I mean, I just don't want the area right now that's real rural out to, especially on the west side and to the southwest. It's going to be that way for quite a while until it's developed. I don't want us to change a category that's going to put a landowner in a crimp of some way for.
So the idea of the future, the policy areas is to look at when will development likely occur. Now, if there's an area like the west side that is kind of cut off right now and has a lot of other things that really don't support those developments, then a rural policy area would be appropriate at at this time.
At this
You
time.
know, if you don't, and in our comprehensive plan, it lays out, and I can't remember if it's 10 or 20 years, but if you don't expect those important things like roads and water within the next 10 or 20 years, then it shouldn't be urban policy area, urban fringe policy area. It should be the rural policy area. And so, you know, so perhaps that west side is definitely an area that the rural policy area would be appropriate for. And, you know, and you also have to think about what's going on in the east side. You know, a lot of that is,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to be sewered in 10 or 20 years. And so on the east side, a good part of the southern part of the east side is probably appropriate for the rural policy area. It's just as we go up farther north towards, as Sean mentioned, 95th Street, how does that interaction and, you know, and frankly, you know, staff might be talking to the city of DeSoto between now and our next meeting, just to see kind of what would make sense for what areas to be the urban fringe policy area.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think, you know, this conversation we can continue on with on the 27th about kind of, you know, which policy areas that we want, but that's a good, Karen had a good summary there. So there were just a couple other quick items that we wanted to talk about. So, you know, we'll be obviously going over 130 a little bit, but Michelle, if you want to go to the next couple of slides. So the next two slides are kind of related, but we wanted to get some quick feedback from the planning commissioners on suggestions for public outreach and then for public involvement. So maybe we can just kind of start with this one since the slide's up, but yeah, so one of the things that we'll do is want to have some kind of public involvement as the, so when we have some finalized recommendations from this subcommittee, it goes on to the planning commission. And then at some point, the planning commission will hold a public hearing where there's, you know, the public will be notified. They can come ask questions, give comments. But what we might want to do is so we definitely, so anytime you do kind of planning updates, you want to have public involvement. And so we have some thoughts about how to do some public outreach. So we just kind of wanted to get some input from the group on that. So one of the things that we're thinking about is doing like postcards or letters to the property owners in the kind of surrounding area of the plan area. Maybe, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier, maybe put some signs up on some major intersections out there that we're going to have a meeting. And then also kind of through the Johnson County social media like Facebook, and we would put that meeting up on our website as well. So does anybody have any other thoughts or suggestions for public outreach?
My only thing is if you could get information to us and we'll duplicate that information on through our social media.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Do you know when you're gonna start getting this out?
Not yet. So if you want to go to the second slide. So one of the other questions is if we want to how we want to engage the public. So there's some outreach mechanisms that we'll use, but so we can do a couple of different options. One could be we could just have public comment as part of the regularly scheduled planning commission meeting, or because they'll also receive public comment when they have the formal public hearing. But could also do just kind of a separate open house meeting and separate before that official public hearing meeting. And, that could be somewhere in, I don't know, Chris, you had talked about this a little bit earlier, but or any other options. So
I like the idea of public meetings. Sometimes nobody turns out, sometimes a lot of people turn out. If you advertise that we're planning wind farms out there, that would up the attendance considerably. But I think that I think I'd like to see just a public information meeting. You could do it at DeSoto High School or some other, place of public convenience.
separate from the actual
Separate from the actual
Planning
planning
Commission
commission meeting and the public hearing.
other thoughts.
Other thoughts, Jim? Mike?
Roger, Jim, any thoughts on?
If you think there's gonna be attendance, that would be a good idea. It'd be nice to have it closer to the actual location.
Yeah,
So if we think we might want to do that, then we would probably get that scheduled. I don't know, within the next couple months, maybe,
Okay,
or
right. Yeah, if I
something
can
like
just
that.
have
But
a
we'll
heads
let
up
you
so
know. And
The governing body doesn't, right?
if-
They can hear it from me before they hear it from
Yeah.
someone who says, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the trick to that is, for us to be able to emphasize at that meeting that this isn't, discussion about Panasonic and
Right.
that development. Obviously, that's already set, but rather just kind of for the county plan, but
On this map. On this map, it shows a Carnap study area. So we got a north-south study area going there, and we've got the Astor Avenue gonna come out of Main Street. And how do those coordinate, and when will those plans be brought together? And should that be something we're even concerned about?
There's no good road through there to service in fact. Part of the study area was so. We coordinate with them, make sure our roads light up.
The timing on that Main Street, end of the road. That kind of drives your thoughts about what to do on that, that south area.
So we updated our land use map and we've preserved a corridor, and KDOT's actually leading that effort to get, but we've tried to preserve a corridor through Sunflower, and they've agreed to it. Not the exact location because, it's subject to change, but we feel like there's a need to connect K10 to I-35. So, and I think a lot of folks in the area are interested in it. I don't know that it's high on KDOT's radar right now. They've got a lot of other irons in the fire, but KDOT has agreed to work with Johnson County, us, Edgerton, Gardner to look at that alignment. Astra Parkway, the first mile of it's being constructed with the KDOT project. It's going to start in a few months. The KDOT's building, upgrading Lexington and 130 or 103rd from Kill Creek or the K10 and Lexington intersection out to Evening Star. And then a mile south of that.
All right. So the members of the committee, I'm going to recommend that we adjourn at this point. We've got another meeting coming up in less than a month. And I think we can consolidate our own thoughts about this, study the maps, and when we come back, maybe we'll be in a position to make some recommendations.
yes, yep, I think that sounds great. Do some thinking, and then that next meeting is scheduled for January 27th.
It is.
And just one last thing, we have made a web page for this update. It went live yesterday, and so if people are asking you questions about what we're doing here, you can refer them to the web page. And also, we're getting the materials that we've been handing out uploaded onto that webpage. So
Any last minute thoughts, comments? Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year, and we'll see you on at January 27th. So mark your calendars. Thanks, everybody.
Brian.